turned to more experienced Netrunners as a source of competitive decks, and I found myself in Nordrunner's channel where he explains his President CEO Andromeda deck. This is a pretty formidable deck. It basically uses the 2-strength breaker suite as breakers with a couple of parasites, which are very useful in today's meta, and R&D interface and HQ interface as a means of central pressure. So I draw into my opening hand as Andromeda, and for the green outline boxes, the 4 cards there, this is what I want to see. 4 cards that I can immediately play out on my first turn that will net me a huge advantage. Show Gamble into a Supplier hosting a Desperado into a Security Testing. So on my next turn, I threaten a 3 credit run if he doesn't ice up Archives. This should be pretty huge. This is a very good starting hand. And there are 2 other desirable cards in my opening hand as well. A Special Order to pull out whatever breaker I might need, and an Emergency Shutdown, which is important in this particular matchup, Blue Sun. When you see Blue Sun out there, you want to see Emergency Shutdown, and more importantly, you want to see that Plascrete, because there is no way you can keep up with Blue Sun's economy. They can just pull back a Curtain Wall to their hand, and there you go. That's enough for Seasaw's Scorched Earth. So the Plascrete in the opening hand is very valuable, especially considering that I'm only running 1 copy of it, given that Andromeda has a 1 in 5 chance of drawing it on the starting hand. So I play out my starting turn, but with a little variation. You notice that he left R&D unchecked, so I have to go in and get that 1 free access. It's pretty stupid if you just play as Andromeda and ignore that free 1 card access, even if it means having to discard 1 card. And I could afford to discard 1 card because I began with 2 suppliers in my hand. So I just needed to discard the duplicate. Seeing that extra 1 card could mean the difference between winning and losing a game, because you can be very sure that R&D isn't going to be exposed for long. Alright, so he starts playing funny stuff. Funny stuff being Oversight AI, Hadrian's Wall. Now at this point, my best play would be Inside Job HQ followed by an Emergency Shutdown on the Hadrian's Wall. I was very tempted to do that, but he still left R&D unchecked, so I had to go in and check it. This is a bad play here. I'm checking his R&D on my last click. This should never happen. If it's a snare, I lose the game. What I should have done was to run it on second click and use my remaining 2 clicks to draw cards or host the Desperado on the Supplier, which I was supposed to do on my first turn. I didn't do that because I lost 1 click from checking R&D. Once again, free accesses must be taken, even if you're Andromeda. There is no question about it, unless your starting hand is so good that you can forego that free access, because it's not going to be free access for long, especially against Blue Sun. Okay, so as expected, he bounces the Hadrians back to his hand. The Inside Job Emergency Shutdown play was not necessary actually. I could wait until a later time to do so, because it doesn't matter. The only time it matters is when I can break the subroutines of that Hadrian's Wall using Corroder. Then it would trash the Hadrian's Wall, which would be pretty huge. But I don't have any Corroder out yet, or the money to break it. Alright, I see a Caduceus on R&D. I break it with Andromeda's 1 link. This 1 link is going to be very, very valuable. Oh yes, another thing I should mention about this deck. Once again, you want to go to Nordrunner's channel to check it out. Never mind, I'll explain it later. Pardon me for that. So yes, I made an R&D run and I fetched the NAPD. So this is very important. Even though I don't have HQ or R&D interface out yet, I want to be getting accesses every single turn if possible. And it's only 3 credits to pay through the Caduceus, so why not? As long as I can maintain my economy, that is the way I'm going to go, because Security Testing Desperado will net me 3 credits every turn. He's not protecting Archives at all. I can use those 3 credits on running Caduceus. That's all that I need really. Alright, so he has 2 remote servers. I have no idea what they are, but I'm not interested in checking them out. They could very well be snares. Once again, Security Testing into a HQ interface on Supplier. Now, Supplier is just amazing. If you've seen my kit refractor decks, Kit Refractor deck actually. Playing, was it Kit? Yes, Kit. Playing modded into HQ and R&D interface. That modded really allows you to play those interfaces easily in situations where you would never. But in Criminal, you cannot afford to splash for modded. So what do? You play Supplier. And as a result, it only costs 2 credits to bring out the interfaces, which is so cheap. Alright, so I security test the other server, which I think is a snare. Once again, I'm getting 3 free credits, which he's not stopping at all. I'm not complaining. And I play my show gamble. And I draw into a Parasite. Parasites will be pretty useless in this matchup. He won't have any small eyes, and he can bounce eyes that have been parasited anyway, which makes my Parasite useless. So once again, he's leaving a server exposed, and this one's an Eliza's toolbox. So, toy box. So I need to get rid of the Eliza's toy box. It just gave him 14 free credits. Not a fan of that. Alright, so I security test run, and I run his Jackson on the 3rd click. But I realize I have 6 cards in hand, and I really want to host the R&D interface on Supplier. So I actually forewent. I actually sacrificed my chance to trash the Eliza's toy box, which you will soon see is a huge mistake. You must trash the toy box the moment it is raised. Right now, he installs a new ice over R&D and a new ice to protect the toy box. This is starting to go out of hand. He can just keep clicking to rest all his ice, get lots of big ice on the board, and I'll be completely suffocated. What was I thinking? I definitely had to challenge the toy box. I really want to challenge the Jackson because I didn't want him drawing into more combo pieces. But, well, now it's time to stop him. First, I inside job into his HQ. I have a plan in mind, obviously. He has a lot of credits, but I have the tools needed to deal with Blue Sun. Oh yes, I liberated my HQ interface as well, so I got to see 2 cards, the second of which was a priority requisition. HQ interface coming into huge play here. Then, because it was a HQ run, emergency shutdown on the curtain wall. Bet you didn't see this coming. Alright, so now I decide on what to do for my 3rd click. I decided to run HQ again to force him to rest the curtain wall. If he doesn't rest it, I'll get to see 2 more cards from his hand and get more information. He rests the curtain wall, leaving him with 9 credits left. I run into his Eliza's toolbox. He doesn't have the credits to rest whatever ice is on it, and as a result, I'm able to trash Eliza's. This is huge. Trashing the Eliza's saved my game. Otherwise, he could have used that to rest a Hadrian's Wall, which could very well be sitting on R&D. It could be a Caduceus, never know. But leaving an Eliza's toolbox to run is one of the biggest mistakes you can make, especially in such a big ice deck. As I said, Eliza's toolbox is very powerful in Wayland because big barriers are exactly what you want to rest with toy box, and he's doing exactly that. I know I cannot let Eliza's toy box run off just like that. He now has 23 credits again because he bounced the curtain wall off. Pretty dangerous. Yes, so I security test, getting more money, and then hosting the daily cast on Supplier. So right now I'm in a good position. I'm on match point. Essentially, one more agenda will win me the game. I've already liberated my second interface. It's an R&D interface, so whichever central I hit, I'm going to access 2 cards, which is awesome. In the meantime, he sneaks out a Project Atlas. I'm not really concerned about 3-2 agendas in Wayland at all, because the only 3-2 he can score is an Atlas, which is useless when scored. It's not an Astro Script, and there are only 3 copies, so he cannot win on Atlases alone. He needs to leave at least 1 agenda with an advancement token on it. The moment I see advancement tokens on table, I'm going to challenge it. You get that. Alright, so I liberate my daily cast off Supplier, and a quick note that you should not, if you're playing on Octagon, you must start your turn with F1, the hotkey F1, before liberating daily cast, because you're not supposed to get the 2 credits from daily cast. Alright, so once again, he has an open server, which means I'm getting free money. This is another big mistake that he's making. He leaves 2 servers open. He has to maintain 2 remote servers, which he cannot afford to. He doesn't have enough ice, and he doesn't have enough money to rest on the big ice. Notice another thing I'm doing. I'm deliberately avoiding I'm deliberately not running his central servers. I do not want him to res ice, because when he reses ice, he gets more power. He has more flexibility to bounce ice back to his hand, gain lots of money, and install new ice. I want to avoid that, so everything on the board is unrest. I'll only start challenging stuff when things start resing, or when he starts placing advancement tokens on stuff. Until then, I can slowly build up my rig, get all the tools I need into my hand. I now have a Gordian blade. I can special order a Corroder. Things will look good. I attempt to security test R&D because all servers are iced up now, and he shows me the wall of static. So I immediately pull out my Corroder. And I try to run R&D to access 2 cards, and then I realize, why did I security test R&D? That was stupid. Ouch. Yes, that was a very stupid move. Running through R&D at this point would be useless, so instead I draw into a new card. Yep, that was a misplay there. I should have security tested archives. The incentive, or rather the possibility of me seeing 2 cards from R&D should be more than enough deterrent for him to res the wall of static against me. Alright, so he installs Amazon Grid, which is pretty cheap because he has the root, and he uses that to res 2 more ice on R&D, which effectively shuts me out right now. Actually, no, it doesn't. It's just a Caduceus into a wall of static. And I have a Faerie and a Corroder on the board, so I can easily bust through R&D if need be. And I don't even have to use Faerie for Caduceus. I can let the trace go because I'm so rich. So first I run HQ, because I have an emergency shutdown in hand. If he attempts to res anything against me, he'll find himself regretting it heavily. But he knows that I'm going to see 2 cards, so as long as he has an agenda in hand, he has to res the ice. He has 3 cards in hand, so if he does have an agenda in hand, the chance of me grabbing it is very high. He has to res it at this point, and he does. It's a Hadrian's Wall. I can break through it, and I definitely do, because I am planning to emergency shut down that Hadrian's Wall right after. And this is kind of a little mistake that he made. By resing the Hadrian's Wall, knowing that I'm playing emergency shutdown, he only has 5 credits left. These 5 credits are not enough for him to res ice to protect the root. So yes, you rarely see Blue Sun as a poor corp, but I'm about to make him poor without using account Siphon at all. Just watch this. First, I access interns and off the grid. That's why he wanted to stop me from coming to his server, because I would be able to trash off the grid for free. So I do de-res the Hadrian's Wall, as I said. Then I run into R&D. I knew I could pay through easily to break all the ice on R&D. It only costs 2 credits, and I get 1 credit back. I access 2 cards, which will probably win me the game, while stepping into Toll Booth. Nope, no win. But I do trash the Amazon, which is giving him 3 credits from now on. Amazon costs 2 to trash, so I'm left with 5 credits, which is enough for me to run that puny server that contains the root. I can destroy the root. If I do, he cannot bounce it back to hand. Can he? Nope. His ice there is too small. So, it's too big for him to rest at this point in time. So I'm able to trash the root. So all of a sudden, he started off with 4 rest cards on the table. Now he only has 2 rest cards left, and both of them cost 3. He's in a very bad position right now. And he has only 5 credits. But he says, well, screw you, I'm just going to score my second Project Atlas. Well, okay, things start to get worrying. He's 1 agenda away from winning. And yes, but he's in a very weak board state right now, with only 2 credits to his name. There is no way he can rest any of his ice. So I'm planning to rampage on his servers, but it's a bit pointless. Chances are that he has no agendas in hand, because I already accessed HQ earlier, and I knew that he drew into a wall of static. If I were to access R&D again, it would be pretty costly, and it won't benefit me much. I'll only see 1 new card. So I decided to run archives instead, because there were a couple of face down cards there. He could have dumped agendas in there sneakily without me knowing. He didn't do that, but at least I gained a credit from checking that, thanks to Desperado. So he's in a very weak state right now, surprise. And I know he's about to draw into a toll booth. So it's an ice he cannot rest. So the only thing he can do is to click for credits right now. See how weak he is? Yeah, that's the problem with Blue Sun. If you misplay and land up with very few credits, the runner can completely take advantage of you. Of course, Emergency Shutdown really helps in this matchup. And now that I know he drew the toll booth, I can see 2 new cards off the top of R&D, and that's exactly what I do. I know he cannot stop me from running through with Caduceus simply because he's too poor. Once again, a huge incentive for keeping Blue Sun poor. And then I break through the wall of static to see 2 new cards. Do I get the agenda? Enigma, NAPD. Yep, that wins the game. So yes, I think this is a fairly good showing of how to deal with Blue Sun. Granted, my deck is, or I shouldn't say this is my deck, this is Nordrunner's deck. It is very well placed to deal with the power of Blue Sun, with inside drops and emergency shutdown to take care of a lot of the nasty ice, and a breaker suite that's flexible enough to bust through all these big ice. Again, you do not need a Calm Siphon to keep Blue Sun poor, as I demonstrated. Then again, that's also due to inexperience with playing with Blue Sun. My opponent definitely shouldn't have rest ice that kept him poor. I mean, it's very easy to take for granted that, hey, I might be able to bounce the root back to my hand, I could bounce Hadrian's Wall back to my hand, but when you get emergency shutdown and you find yourself unable to protect those assets that you are banking on, suddenly the game becomes a whole lot more harder. And that's exactly the pit that he found himself in, unable to climb out of. This Nordrunner's deck is very, very powerful. It is very versatile and can set up pretty quickly. It also generates a lot of money, punishing corps that fail to keep me out of my servers. And which is another mistake he made. He tried to go for the remote servers before attempting to ice up archives. He really should have gotten some ice on archives early on, at least to deter me from security testing. Because of that, I was able to get lots of free easy marks every single turn, which culminated in me having enough credits to break through that Hadrian's Wall and having that mega turn where I destroyed his Amazon, his Root, and his Hadrian's Wall all in a single turn. I needed a lot of money to do that, and he gave it to me. So yes, it still is an economic war when you're playing against Wayland, but it's a very different kind of economic war. I hope you found this game very thrilling. Well, it was certainly a blast to play. Thanks for watching and happy net running. See you around.